between the Hells Angel and a rival gang may have been in retaliation for murder.
Members of the Hells Angels
and police investigating the Hells Angels
and hoping that this will wipe out the entire organization.
Chapter Hells
Angels. Let's talk about some names that keep showing up in police records, names tied to violence and fear. But none of them carry the same weight as Necati Arabaci, better known as the Pat of Cologne. This guy is one of the most dangerous criminals in Europe. He's a man who makes his own rules and runs the underworld with a grip of steel. Back in the 90s, Arabaci used his successful security companies and clubs in Cologne to climb the ladder of power. Before long, his influence stretched across the Ruhr area and eventually all of Germany. But that wasn't enough for him. He expanded his empire across Europe and added even more industries to his growing portfolio. These days, he's working closely with the Turkish mafia and South American semi-legal suppliers to keep his operations running smoothly. He's even got political support in some places, despite being banned from the Schengen area for years because of his criminal record. Recently, videos of him have been popping up all over Europe, including Germany. But what's really going on here? What sinister plans could Arabaci be cooking up for his underworld empire? To get the full picture, we need to rewind to the early 90s, where his cold-blooded empire first took shape. Back then, the shadow economy was like the Wild West, especially in the nightlife scene. Leasing women wasn't exactly legal, but it wasn't fully outlawed either. It was this murky gray zone that clever operators exploited. The nightlife industry in the 90s was a hotspot for organized crime. Criminal gangs worked together to rake in the cash, setting up something called a partnership tax that shop owners had no choice but to pay. Of course, with so much money involved, things often got messy. Turf wars over the most lucrative areas broke out constantly. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, many women from Eastern Europe were dragged into the business. Not all by choice. Some were forced into it, often kept under control with drugs, while their bosses got rich off their suffering. The workers trapped in this ruthless world lived lives full of dependence, violence, and pain, with almost no way out. But for the nearly 20-year-old Necati Arabaci, this cutthroat business was a goldmine waiting to be tapped. The young Turkish man from Cologne wasn't about to settle for an average life. No, he had bigger dreams, wealth, power, and control. Luckily for him, scruples weren't part of his DNA, and the well-being of others? That didn't even register. What he did have was brains and a talent for strategy. Arabaci figured out early that climbing to the top required allies, so he joined the Hells Angels, gaining both muscle and connections. This gave him a strong foundation to break into the underworld. His first move? The bouncer business. Rumor has it he demanded donations from Cologne's bouncers through his biker brothers, offering protection in return. Acting as a middleman, Arabaci reportedly had over 120 men under his command. Even then, he was raking in serious cash with his clever setup. But more importantly, it put him in control of Cologne's nightlife scene. Here's the catch. Once someone paid for his protection, they were bound to him for life. Before long, Arabaci was dipping his fingers into darker, bloodier industries and spreading his influence across Europe. But, like a grim reaper taking one soul at a time, his rise was a step-by-step process. Even as he was pulling in piles of cash through his bouncer empire, Arabaci's hunger for power and money was far from satisfied. He wanted more. And with his moral compass permanently out of order, he found new ways to grow his empire. Using his underworld connections, he entered the adult entertainment industry, an arena where, without the right contacts, you were at the bottom of the food chain. And let's face it, this world is full of ruthless predators waiting to devour anyone weaker. Arabaci threw himself into the scene, taking stakes in countless shady establishments. With his calculated approach and lack of hesitation to get his hands dirty, he thrived, climbing further up the criminal ladder. His ambition? As insatiable as the sharks around him. Arabaci wasn't afraid to experiment with different ways to grow his empire. He started investing in juice press companies and even became a partner in several shops. Once he had a foothold, he took over managing the businesses, focusing on making them as profitable as possible. His management style included tasks like hiring staff, mainly women brought in from Eastern Europe, coming up with strategic marketing plans like buy 3, pay for 2, and coordinating his team. To stay under the radar, he used frontmen who acted as the official owners on paper, keeping his involvement a secret. Eventually, he hired a manager to handle operations, allowing him to rake in profits without lifting a finger. The genius of this system was how it kept Arabaci in the background. Nobody outside his circle knew about his investments, and that anonymity allowed him to fly under the radar for years. As his territory expanded, so did his power. Competitors were given two choices: pay a protection fee or shut down entirely. This slick operation earned Arabaci control over Cologne's nightlife, and the nickname the Pate of Cologne. Not stopping there, Arabaci pushed his influence into the Ruhr region and eventually Frankfurt, earning millions while still in his youth. At first, he hid his growing wealth behind a legitimate fruit trade, but as the money piled up, it became harder to justify, and authorities started to take notice. Arabaci quickly became a street legend in Cologne, with stories about him spreading far and wide. Unsurprisingly, it wasn't long before the police caught wind of his operations. In October 2002, during a major raid in the Cologne area aimed at cracking down on organized crime, police searched numerous clubs and arrested several criminals. Arabaci was one of them. Over the years, charges piled up against him, including extortion, human trafficking, running a criminal network, and exploiting his workers. His trial lasted for years and attracted massive public attention. In the end, Necati Arabaci was sentenced to 9 years in prison for his crimes. Do the authorities really think they've dismantled Arabaci's criminal empire with his imprisonment? They couldn't be more wrong. Despite being locked up, Arabaci kept his operations running like a well-oiled machine, managing everything from behind bars. How do we know this? Because authorities bugged his cell in Bochum prison. It turns out that from there, he even orchestrated a revenge plot against the public prosecutor who had pushed for his conviction. Arabaci ordered threats against the prosecutor, forcing him to live under constant protection. His house had to be remodeled for added security, and bodyguards accompanied him everywhere. Still, the fear was overwhelming. By 2007, the prosecutor could no longer cope. Fearing for his life and his family's safety, he left the country entirely. Meanwhile, Arabaci had only served 3 years of his 9-year sentence when the Cologne public prosecutor made him a deal. Agree never to return to Germany, and he'd be released early and deported to Turkey. Arabaci, ever the opportunist, gladly accepted. But a quiet life in Turkey wasn't on the cards for him. Instead, he took his operations to the next level. By 2008, the Hells Angels started expanding into Spain, with Arabaci leading the charge. The party island of Majorca, teeming with German tourists looking for a good time, was the perfect base for his next big move. Among the first to establish themselves on the island were his trusted associates, ready to capitalize on its booming nightlife scene. The Yousafi brothers, Abdelghani and Keel, first caught the attention of Spanish authorities when an illegal casino operation linked to them was discovered. Alongside their partner, Hannah F., they became key players in founding the infamous Hells Angels charter in Majorca. However, their reign was cut short a few years later when they were arrested on charges related to drug dealing and trafficking in companionship services. The trio remains behind bars to this day. Meanwhile, Arabaci, now based in Turkey, wasted no time in cementing his status as a major player in the criminal underworld. He established the first Hells Angels charter in Turkey, immediately taking on the role of boss. Despite being thousands of kilometers away from Cologne, rumors persist that he still controls much of his empire in North Rhine-Westphalia. And as he had done in Germany, Arabaci started building a network of fun houses in Turkey while forging connections with Afghan suppliers of heroin. Turkey served as a perfect gateway for smuggling the drug into Europe. He also diversified his business ventures, expanding into fireworks, which added yet another revenue stream. But Arabaci's insatiable hunger for power and profits drove him to meddle in Majorca's growing Hells Angels scene. Hearing of the group's plans, he invested heavily in the island's thriving nightlife and bought into several lucrative businesses. Despite his official entry ban, Arabaci was rumored to have been present in Majorca in 2010, the year the now legendary charter was established to expand his influence. Arabaci strategically elevated his loyal followers to leadership roles within the Majorca charter, including the Yousafi brothers. Together with the notorious Frank Haneboff, a heavyweight in Hanover's underworld and a pioneer of Majorca's Hells Angels operations, Arabaci turned the island into a gold mine for the organization. Hanabi F., often regarded as one of the most powerful Hells Angels figures ever, had already built a stronghold in Majorca's nightlife by the time Arabaci joined forces with him. For Arabaci, Majorca was a treasure trove of opportunities. Its subtropical climate made it a magnet for young, party-hungry tourists from across Europe. At the same time, the island's strategic location near the mainland offered a convenient hub for smuggling operations and other shady dealings. This combination made Majorca the perfect stepping stone for Arabaci to expand his ever-growing empire. In 2010, despite being officially banned from entering Majorca, Arabaci allegedly set foot on the island to oversee the establishment of a legendary Hells Angels charter. This charter aimed to solidify his influence and tighten his grip on the island's criminal economy. Arabaci strategically promoted his most trusted allies, including the Yusafi brothers, to high-ranking positions within the charter. Partnering with the infamous Frank Hanabi F., one of the most influential Hells Angels figures of all time, Arabaci turned Majorca into a cash cow. Hanabi F., already a key player in Hanover's nightlife, had set up operations on the island and was instrumental in building its criminal infrastructure. Majorca's appeal was undeniable for Arabaci. Its subtropical climate attracted millions of tourists annually, particularly young Europeans looking for hedonistic escapades. For underworld players, the island's proximity to both mainland Europe and Africa made it an ideal hub for trafficking drugs and people. The sheer volume of over 10 million visitors a year made it nearly impossible for the overburdened authorities to track and control criminal activity. But this golden age wouldn't last forever. By 2013, Spanish police launched Operation Casablanca, an intensive raid that marked a turning point for Majorca's criminal networks. After months of surveillance, including intercepted phone calls and tailing gang members, authorities made their move. Over 200 police officers stormed various apartments, offices, and properties linked to the Hells Angels. Hanabi was arrested on serious charges, including running a criminal organization, sending shockwaves throughout Europe. His capture left a power vacuum, putting the future of many criminal enterprises on shaky ground. Through Hanabi F's intercepted communications, investigators uncovered links to Arabaci, confirming their suspicions of his deep involvement in the operations. Yet, Arabaci, ever the mastermind, showed no signs of concern. Confident in his ability to evade direct repercussions, he remained entrenched in his empire, continuing to coordinate activities from afar. Meanwhile, tensions between the older generation of German rockers and the newer wave of Hells Angels under Arabaci's leadership were brewing. These disputes threatened to boil over, further complicating the already volatile dynamics of the European criminal underworld. The long-standing rivalry between Turkish and German members of the Hells Angels reached its boiling point. As cultural and leadership clashes intensified, German rockers often criticized the Turkish members, accusing them of straying from the core values and traditions of the Hells Angels. Arabaci, who harbored a deep disdain for the German factions, only exacerbated these tensions. According to an insider, Neko only trusted the Turkish members. To him, the others were worthless. In September 2013, these simmering hostilities exploded into outright violence when Arabaci's associates reportedly stormed the Krefeld Hells Angels branch and brutally attacked a fellow member. This incident prompted several charters to break away from the Turkish-led faction. However, Arabaci remained unfazed, determined to continue expanding his criminal network despite the growing fractures within the organization. Over the years, Arabaci's name frequently made headlines for gang violence, drug trafficking, and money laundering. Banks flagged his attempts to clean large sums of cash, and he was often cited in European countries despite his entry bans. Authorities began to regret his deportation, realizing it hadn't curtailed his criminal activities. After the arrest of Frank Hanabi F. in 2005, the Spanish Supreme Court issued an EU-wide arrest warrant for Arabaci. He faced allegations of belonging to a criminal organization, human exploitation, drug trafficking, and coordinating illegal enterprises in Majorca, including staffing illicit establishments with coerced workers. Despite these mounting legal troubles, Arabaci refused to slow down. His operations continued to thrive, and he remained a step ahead of the authorities. By June 2018, his cat-and-mouse game with law enforcement reached new heights. Turkish special forces launched a high-profile raid in Sezme, targeting Arabaci after he refused to hand over members of his crew linked to 2 assassinations. The dramatic operation resulted in 35 arrests and the seizure of a significant cache of firearms. Even as the charges against Arabaci piled up, nearly as long as an encyclopedia, he showed no signs of backing down. His resilience, coupled with his cunning ability to operate under the radar, cemented his reputation as one of Europe's most untouchable criminal figures. Arabaci seems to have a knack for slipping through the cracks of the legal system. After a high-profile arrest in Turkey, where he was accused of ordering a murder in connection with his protection donation racket, he was released in just 18 days due to a lack of evidence. This wasn't his first Houdini act. In 2018, despite being linked to serious charges, he walked free in less than 3 months. His secret? The world's most powerful currency? Connections. Arabaci's network stretches far and wide, including underworld influencers, politicians, and even officials within law enforcement. Allegedly, he maintained a mole within Interpol who kept him informed of critical developments, acting like a modern-day carrier pigeon for vital intelligence. Secret files have also hinted at his business dealings with First League Turkish football players, though the exact nature of these partnerships remains a mystery. Some speculate it could tie into his extensive experience in the security sector. In the summer of 2015, a controversial photograph emerged from the Turkish resort town of Cizme. The image captured Arabaci alongside several notorious figures linked to the Hells Angels, including Erkan A., a former Cologne rocker boss. That same year, Erkan A. was involved in the killing of an Albanian in a bar brawl over stolen goods before fleeing to Turkey. Others in the photo included Engin K., Serkan A., and Ibrahim K., all implicated in criminal activities, including a bar fight and subsequent shootings. Notably, Ibrahim K. was later sentenced to 43 years in prison after a shooting incident claimed 4 lives. Another individual, CMH, also present in the photo, gained infamy for pulling a gun during a brawl in Izmir. Even outside of these controversial associations, Arabaci remains a polarizing figure. His ability to navigate between the worlds of crime, business, and influence has solidified his reputation as an enigma in the underworld. Feared, admired, and despised in equal measure. Necati Arabaci is a figure that embodies the contradictions of the modern underworld. Someone who blends ambition, discretion, and power in ways that both fascinate and unsettle those around him. While some admire him for the business opportunities he offers and the wealth he distributes, others despise him for his unorthodox methods and his deviation from the traditional rocker image that Hells Angels members typically embody. He's often criticized for not fitting the classic image of a rocker boss: no leather jacket, no motorcycle, and never seen publicly engaging in the usual rituals associated with the club. This dissonance has made him unpopular with many in the Hells Angels ranks, as he doesn't adhere to the group's established customs. However, his ability to operate outside the conventional expectations is part of what makes him such a powerful figure. His presence has been reported in various parts of Europe: Spain, Monaco, Vienna, and even Germany. His apparent mobility, the ability to move freely across borders and blend into different locations, speaks to his power and resources. For instance, when spotted in Monaco, the license plate of his car was from Switzerland, an infamous hub for anonymous financial activities. This is a clear indicator of his access to international money laundering networks, showcasing his ability to operate on a global scale. But what is it that drives Arabaci? He has already acquired what most would consider the ultimate success: wealth, influence, and freedom. Yet, his ambition seems unquenchable. He is not satisfied with his current status. Rather, he is driven by a much larger goal: dominating Europe. He's not content to sit idly in a beach town, driving a Ferrari. His goal is power on a continent-wide scale. This desire for expansion fuels his relentless pursuit of more control, more influence, and a wider sphere of operations. As for how long he can continue to operate with such success, that's the big question. Arabaci has built a criminal empire that stretches across borders, and his vast network of contacts has allowed him to stay one step ahead of the law for years. But with so many eyes on him now, the risk of his downfall grows. His vision for Europe, if realized, could make him an even more formidable figure in the underworld. However, As with all criminal empires, the question remains, how long can it last? How long can he keep everything running smoothly before the authorities or his rivals close in? At present, the answer is unclear. Arabaci continues to navigate his world with careful discretion, but history has shown that even the most powerful criminals can eventually face their reckoning. For now, though, it seems like his empire remains intact, and his ambitions continue to grow,